How is this horizontal jaw relation in complete denture recorded? These are the various methods as listed before. And coming on to each method one by one, first is the wax closure method, tactile or intraocclusal check method. Check for the inconsistency of the records, the possibility of occlusal rim sliding over to any eccentric position. There can be tilting, leverage or displacement of the record basis, which is very common with this technique, thereby resulting in more amount of inaccuracies. There is always a tendency for the patient to bite and protrude the mandible. The functional chew-in method was suggested by Needlehouse, wherein he used 4 metal styli placed in the compound maxillary rims and tracing was obtained in the mandibular rims while patient moved the mandible. Peterson's method, he made a trench in the mandibular occlusal rim and filled that trench with a mix of plaster and carborundum paste, and the rims were placed used to determine the vertical dimension, and patient was asked to retrude the mandibular position, and the rims were joined with the help of metal staples. Coming on to the graphic method, this method was introduced by Hesse in 1897, later popularized by Geissy in 1910, and it is also called as Gothic arch tracing because it resembles the Gothic architecture. The synonyms for this method are it is stylus tracing method, central bearing tracing method, needle point method, arrow point tracing. All movements are recorded in the horizontal plane, hence we obtain a arrowhead like tracing. Okay, the center point determines the centric relation, and this in the one projecting from CR is the protrusive movements. The two extended arms are the right lateral and left lateral movements. Now this tracing, graphical tracing, can be recorded either by extraorally or intraorally, and this graphical method is considered to be one of the most reliable and scientific method. Intraoral method, tracing is closer to the center of the mandibular movements and it is more consistent and accurate compared to the extraoral method. The lips are always in passive contact. It is easier to secure the mandible in centric against the plate while recording. But the limitation is with intraoral graphical tracing, it is difficult to visualize. Extraoral method, the advantages are visualization of the tracing is easy and it is easy to guide the patient to all the positions. But the disadvantages are the flexibility of the tracers, the lips are not in passive contact, and it can cause discomfort to the patient because it is huge components which extend out of the mouth. The limitations of graphic tracing are it is preferred in good edentulous ridges with normal intra-arch relationship. It is however difficult in excessively resorbed and flabby ridges because there can be instability of the denture basis and restricts its use. It as well cannot be used when there is inadequate intra-arch distance. There are various other atypical forms of arrowhead tracing like flat forms, asymmetrical, absent, apex or round form, miniature arrowhead tracing, double arrowhead tracing, dorsally extended arrowhead, interrupted Gothic arch and atypical forms. Now moving on to the regular method of how horizontal jaw relation is recorded. Place 3 widely separated lines between the rims in the centric position. It's very critical to check the record bases or heels are not touching each other at the rear position. Mark the lip line marks, eliminate the contact with the record bases. Register the centric relation, mark 2 sharp V-shaped notches in the molar or premolar areas of each sided wax at the depth of 1 to 2 millimeter. Then inject thin layer of bite registration paste material. You can even use zinc oxide eugenol impression paste and ask the patient to retrude the mandible, or alu wax can also be used as a bite registration material, and ask the patient to get the mandible in the most retruded position and record it. This is how centric jaw relation is recorded. Once it is recorded, mount it on the articulator and go ahead with teeth arrangement. Eccentric records on the other hand, which is protrusive lateral, right lateral and left lateral, can be used for recording the eccentric positions. However, when we use Hanau's articulator, Hanau's formula can be used. L is equal to h by 8 plus 12. With Gothic arch tracing, we obtain the h value, and then lateral condylar guidance value is obtained with this formula. L is equal to h by 8 plus 12. Now, maxillomandibular relation for complete denture, the centric relation helps to determine the optimal position of the mandible to the maxilla, and by knowing the eccentric records, it is easy for us to program the articulator to obtain optimal occlusion. In recent advances of Hentrich jaw relation, we have digital Gothic arch tracers and we have handheld scanners and digital designed headgears for recording of the mandibular movement. Apart from that, with the use of virtual articulators, we have softwares that determine the mandibular movements. The trajectory tracers are attached for determining the centric jaw relation.